Thanks, everyone. We can get started because I think we're running 12 minutes late. So thanks for joining the panel. My name is Alan. I am a contributor at DoorSwap and the head of APAC at SwapKit. We are a cross-chain decentralized exchange and API solution. I'm very pleased to be joined by four amazing speakers here today, and I'll let them do a small introduction for their own projects as well as themselves first. So,
yep.
Please.
Hi everyone, I'm Shubham. I'm the head of ecosystem at Manta network. Like before this, I've been working in the space since 2020, starting with Polygon, then with Mantle network, and since 2023, I've been with Manta. Talking about Manta, so we initially started as the first modular L2, but recently, if we know that the ecosystem of the L2s is quite fragmented, so we started focusing more on the consumer side. So we started building our own products, including a CeDeFi product as well. So apart from that, like we are on reporting some TradeFi, RWA, and some real-world assets to the ecosystem.
Hey guys, Constance here. I'm the co-founder of Pacifica. So at Pacifica, we are a new PaperX. We started building this January, launched our testnet in March, and our mainnet in June. So we are currently at a closed beta phase. So if anyone wants to check out our PaperX, our team is around. Thank you guys.
Hey guys, my name is Clarence, co-founder at Herring Global. So we are an institutional trading desk. Covering like two main business lines. One is OTC trading, and one is market making. And I think under the umbrella of OTC and market making, we have different sub-strategies to cater for various counterparties, whether or not their whole goal is to really inject liquidity into the market, or whether or not they want to get some yield at the end of the day. These are the things that we do from a day-to-day.
Hi everyone, Saren, core contributor from Blyz Labs. Blyz is a new platform where you launch your ideas, get validation, and then get traction. Think of it as capital markets meets Web3 application store. The first use case we are going to launch in August very soon, so it will support the launch of upcoins that will be getting validated on the platform and then will be graduating into their own upchains. So yeah, looking forward to our today's discussion. Let's get started.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, everyone. So the title of this panel is actually CeDeFi era, bringing DeFi to the masses. But what does that actually mean? I kind of want to get into just covering the basics first, right? So CeDeFi, technically, it means centralized decentralized finance, which is essentially an oxymoron, right? And there's always been a saying that decentralization itself is a spectrum. So what is even the definition of CeDeFi? I just want to start off with this kind of this question. What does CeDeFi mean to you and your projects?
I'll go first. So it's very simple for me, CeFi plus DeFi. So where you onboard the centralized finance, including TradeFi, including RWAs, ETFs, and all the things which we have seen this year. Plus, the Web2 users, when they come to the decentralized ecosystem through KYC or maybe ZK KYC, I mean specifically, if they come from that particular side, so it's called as CeFi plus DeFi, so CeDeFi. Apart from that, it's very simple that when you use the Web2 products in Web3, but specifically with very simple use case or with the simple UI UX where you can do it similar in Web2, like connect your Gmail account and buy through your Apple Pay and stuff. So that is very simple. But apart from that, I think this year was specifically for the CeFi and DeFi collaboration together. So institutional capital, it can be TradeFi products, money market instruments, it can be capital market stuff like stocks, bonds, and everything. So when they come to on-chain with a semi-decentralization, it is called as CeFi, for me at least.
So I think there are different ways to understand what actually is CeDeFi. So if we put that into a spectrum, on one hand is centralized finance, on the other side is decentralized finance. So far, the market has been thinking it from both angles. If you really look at CeDeFi from the centralized part, you are thinking about how we can offer DeFi products or DeFi services through a centralized way to institutional players. So for example, if a regulated entity wants to legitimately participate on DeFi protocol for, let's say, yield or staking, they probably face compliance issues where they worry about where their custody is, right? If everything just go through decentralized protocol. That's why they partner with centralized entities for custodian, for asset management and things like that. And I think that's initially how people think about CeDeFi. And gradually, when the market started growing, we see other people thinking from the other angle, which is more from the decentralization part. When you think about how DEXs operate, which is relevant to how we started building Pacifica, you think about it, let's say if you want to put leverage product or perp product onto DeFi, whether the speed or the latency or the cost for every change of state is what users want, right? So ultimately, for every builder, you are building something that users like to use or actually want to use. So if there are frictions that's caused by decentralization, do you stick to decentralization because you want the purity of your architecture, or you try to figure out something that is, on one hand, not sacrificing the decentralization, but also cater to users' needs? So that's the other way that people started thinking about actually what we should decentralize and what we should use centralized services. So for us, under the start process, we decided to put our order book, our risk engine, matching engine off-chain, and everything else, including settlement, validation, and records on-chain. So that's giving users enough speed for a better user experience, but also preserve the nature of decentralization finance, which is permissionless, which is self-custody and things like that. So there are two ways of how you really look at CeDeFi, and there are protocols on the market right now prove both has real use cases. So I think it really depends on the use cases and what are the users actually looking for.
I kind of echo what Constance mentioned when we talk about big institutions like VCs, hedge funds. They do go through centralized providers to really get the benefit of DeFi. So on our side, we have been seeing a lot of that as well. Basically, it's kind of like a segregation of role, right? The VCs can just spend their time, really advising their projects, hunting for more new gems, while we can take care of like all the things trading, both in and out of DeFi. So back to the question, right? CeDeFi, I have a slightly different definition because most people look at it from a product point of view. From my point of view, it's more liquidity oriented, so and more opportunity oriented. So my definition is always gonna be like CeDeFi is two pools of liquidity, and the DeFi part is growing, right? So it's really just platforms for us to extract the best prices, get more certainty of like settlement and stuff like that.
Maybe I'll just start from how CeDeFi concerns to Blyz Labs itself, and then I'll add some more opinions about CeDeFi itself. So we are fully decentralized protocol, and we have taken quite a long time to kind of go through the whole flow of the platform to make sure that everything is well decentralized, secure, and every party's rights are well protected within the context of the smart contract. So, however, we are a platform where other projects are going to launch their apps, and we are non-opinionated. So we are going to support both CeFi and DeFi applications that are intending to launch on it. So my opinion about CeDeFi, from the users, some of our panel members mentioned about the user experience becoming much simpler and easier thanks to it, and I'm very supportive of this idea. Of course, as long as it is done, under good regulated environment, where the users' kind of interests are not being compromised by any means, and the users' rights are protected. Adding more tools to make things simpler in terms of UX, I'm quite supportive of that. And I think another big direction of CeDeFi that we are already seeing that's coming up is bringing of assets that are not natively built on chain, right? Real world assets, stable coins, real world kind of different category of assets like real estate, et cetera, bringing them on chain, giving people who are using different on-chain apps exposure to the APIs and yields from generating from these platforms. I think this is going to be a great use case to kind of merge the traditional finance and decentralized finance. And again, but I have to go back and mention that I think this has to be done in a well-regulated kind of environment to make sure that the user rights are well protected. And I think it seems like the US is going to lead this wave of innovation.
Yeah, we had a conversation just preparing for this panel, and I think that's a really good point. There's, I guess, to elaborate on what we've just discussed, there is always a degree of counterparty risk associated with any asset that you hold in crypto, right? Obviously, some are more secure than others, and self-custody brings you closer to having, your own interests protected. But obviously, if it's a case of real world assets or stable coins, then you are trusting a party with backing those assets. And we're in terms of my experiences in DeFi, DeFi is actually still pretty new, all things considered, right? It wasn't that long ago we had AMMs which allowed for on-chain trading. And we things we take it for granted these days, but it's not even that long ago where everything had to be done on a centralized exchange or peer-to-peer model. And so I think the practical argument is always being, well, users need certain functions today, right? Whether it's I think trading has largely been solved, with AMMs, and now there's interoperable, methods to do cross-chain swaps, even or within single-chain ecosystems. But do you think this sort of history, the core argument of okay, it's for user onboarding, right? So, given that there's always improvements happening in DeFi, whether it's like I said, interoperability of cross-chain liquidity or accounts, gas abstraction, or layer 2, layer 3 ways of scalability. Do you think what kind of unique values do you think CeDeFi provides that can't be achieved on a long enough time frame where through the continuous improvement of decentralized solutions?
Got it. Okay, so again, my answer is quite similar on that particular side as well. So let's take an example of 2020 when I started crypto. So at that time, Dex's V2 was famous, specifically for Uniswap. That time, we didn't think about stable coins backing some yield, because in US it's not possible to get the yields, or maybe you get APY on your saving account. So that is one of the major unique value proposition which we saw in this cycle, that people can hold a stable coin and they can earn yield out of it. Now, how this yield is coming from, it's very specific, either they invest in the bonds, they pass on the yield to you. If they invest in some stocks, strategies, arbitrage opportunities and stuff. So initially in TradFi, if we talk about Goldman Sachs and stuff, so they used to do all these TradFi products where they used to analyze the strategies of money market instrument, how much yield they are providing, how much we can give it back to the users. Similarly, it was around initially at 4 to 5%, which was quite low as compared to DeFi. So in last cycle, I still remember I've seen 1000% APY as well on some protocols. So it was very weird for a Web3 person to go to Web2, Web2 these instruments and get just 4 or 5% yield. So that was the reason initially the ETFs and all these things came into picture, and people thought the mass adoption can come through this way, where CeDeFi can just be the front end, but the base infrastructure will still be the decentralized one. So let's talk about RWA. So what we are doing is fractionalizing the assets, which was done previously as well. So I'm sure like a lot of people know about REITs. So REITs were the one where you fractionalize the property, you issue a ETF on the stock market. But it is done when, when it comes to a blockchain, so it is known as a RWA project. So it is not a new thing. It's just that the infrastructure or the baseline is changed, and it is made as a tokenized, which has more liquidity, and people can trade it simply. So you don't have to wait for it. That is also one of the reasons, like we have seen a lot of VCs in Web3 because it's easy to dump the token. You don't have to take permissions of anyone. So, but yeah, so coming back to like what things unique we have seen, like first, on-chain stocks. It's so cool that you can use your BTC, you can use a meme coin to buy a stock like Tesla. So maybe I'm using Waing to buy a Tesla stock. So that is a cool feature, which brings the new liquidity into the market. Second, I'm really bullish on all these stable coins which we have seen right now. So it includes like projects like Ethena, Ondo, and other people. Third, RWA is still new. I don't think like it has the mass adoption. People say a lot of pipelines they have like 450 million, 550 million, but I still don't trust them. Similar to we have seen Manta. So it's like people think that RWA still has the adoption, but I don't think so. But yeah, apart from that, stablecoin with yield-bearing assets, all the CeDeFi products, which has a better UI UX where you can use your payment system as Apple Pay. So recently, Binance introduced Velo. So Velo is a quite good product, which we have seen to like integrate to any product which we have right now. But in general, I still believe that we are still on the early stage. We don't have ETFs right now. So ETFs are on stock market, but if we want to create a club of ETFs like stocks or maybe tokens on chain, so we don't have that right now. So there are a lot of things which we need to improve, and I think so it's like 1% of it which we have already done on the CeDeFi side.
Sorry, this question is just given that there will be continuous developments in DeFi to improve UX, right? Get around like the barriers. What unique, values do you think like the CeDeFi part of CeDeFi is necessary, in the long term?
I sort of think when I hear about this question, I think about what users actually coming to DeFi via CeDeFi, right? I think in the early stage of DeFi, when there's AMM, when there's yield, lots of people were okay with this decentralization feature, and lots of people actually love the function without KYC and free and easy of creating wallets. But when the DeFi use case keep expanding, there's more people that actually need someone else or like an intermediary to power the execution for them. So I think that's how CeDeFi came into this the concept in the beginning, right? And I think for CeDeFi to really grow to the next stage, in terms of how expanding the entire DeFi use case, I think there's multiple layers that when I think about this question. Firstly, is definitely who are the precise target customers that this CeDeFi or DeFi in general is trying to go for, right? And with the ETFs and with the US regulation coming to more and more clear, and also potential regulations that come into DeFi, I think the DeFi space in general are getting prepared for talking to regulators. And that's probably part of the major issue or like major challenge that CeDeFi as a whole, or I think DeFi in general, has to prepare themselves for, whether they are operating AMM or they are operating a layer one chain, or like us, we're operating a DEX, even though it's not KYC, but do you understand KYT, or do you have necessary safeguard of custodians, or are you ready to onboard fiat on and off-ramp partners? I think that's a lot of the thought process behind. And I think in this cycle, because of the rise of meme coin, it makes people understand DeFi a lot easier. So that's why when we saw the launch of Trump tokens, lots of people come onto Moonshot and use their credit cards to buy meme coins. And I think that's one way that we are introducing mass adoption and also fiat currencies into the DeFi world. But that part still remain unclear in terms of regulation framework and also lots of necessary KYC transactions. But that indeed widens the pie and liquidity of DeFi in general. So I think there are a lot of different gray areas that will become clearer and clearer moving forwards. And I do think that regulations and necessary framework in place would help DeFi in general grow bigger and bigger.
I think in my world, the short answer to this is better optionality, because then with a good CeDeFi bridge, you will be able to access your funds to CeFi and then bring it back to DeFi when you need it. So I think in my world, the two main important things are execution speed and settlement speed. And I think I can draw like two examples of failures and successes of both like CeFi and DeFi to illustrate this a little bit more. So if you guys remember, Trump coin was launched on a random Saturday. Like out of nowhere, someone just decided, or the team just decided to launch Trump meme token on Solana. It started on Jupiter. Everyone was going crazy about it. Solana was congested, and like I think people are finding it very difficult to get the next transaction on chain. Shortly after, then you have your likes of Binance and some other centralized exchanges listed. And these are the guys that can handle the real load, right, in today's environment. So they can handle like 1 million TPS, no issues. But then when you go to Solana, it gets a little bit congested. So without a proper access to both, it will be a lot more difficult to accumulate and decumulate quickly. So that is one example where I think you probably want to have access to both CeFi and DeFi, even though I think most of the audiences here are leaning towards more to the DeFi spectrum. Now, another example which DeFi clearly won was during the Pump.Fund auction mechanism, right? They have allocations on chain, which is a huge part. And then they also have allocations given to a few CEXs like KuCoin, Gate, and Kraken, and I think another 2 more. And then you can see Solana handled that really well. All the allocations went very smoothly. It was pretty much a very fair way of raise. But then that was also a point where I think the CEXs had some hiccups. And then without a proper CeDeFi access, or rather a bridge to really move funds quickly and effectively, it will be quite hard to get your hands on the allocations. So I think what's needed for CeDeFi is really the speed of moving things from one place to another, and then so that when the crunch time is there, when we really need the liquidity, we are able to access your funds and your technology and stuff like that.
Yep. Going back to the question that Alan asked, a lot of innovations happening across different chains that are trying to make the UX as easy as possible. As you mentioned, gas abstraction, chain abstraction, wallet abstraction, and all of these innovations are being built into the protocols themselves, such as Ethereum. And then, of course, we also have some competing chains, Solana, et cetera, which came with easier UX from the very start. So yeah, a lot of innovations happening that are going to make the user experience much simpler as we move forward. So I think centralizing UX, making the user experience easier by compromising the decentralization, it will probably be depending on the particular use case that we are talking about. And I think in many of the use cases, in the future, there will not be a specific need to centralize the UX. At least that's my hope, and that's my projection to the future. That I think that DeFi is going to, or at least the bridge between this regular user and DeFi is going to become much simpler. Also, as long as the DeFi's backend is based on smart contracts, I think it's also very acceptable that we would have several service providers who would compete on the user interface level. So, for example, like let's take our protocol. They have, completely decentralized smart contracts. They also have a decentralized actually front end that is running on IPFS. But there are many interface providers who are providing users the interface and different UX so that the users can interact with the protocol itself. And also I think we should take into consideration the particular context. I think if we are speaking about B2C context, where the users are probably facing a lot of counterparty risk. There's a lot of information asymmetry between users and protocols. Maybe it's slightly less acceptable, or at least the teams need to provide proper disclosures to the users about the aspects of the experience that is more centralized and which parts of the experience might be affecting user security. And I think in the context of B2B experiences, it might be slightly different because the information asymmetry is not as big. Teams teams know each other, they can have contracts, they can know each other very, very well and be able to kind of make transactions based on trust. So I think, whether we want to, rely on centralized providers or decentralized providers in terms of, this UX aspect, it really will depend on the context. There is, I think, no, clear right or wrong answer. It really always depends on the particular use case.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, the examples you gave are really relevant for actually what we've been building over the years because, we started ThorSwap in 2021, last DeFi summer. ThorChain was the first one to have an AMM model for cross-chain swaps between Bitcoin and Ethereum. And so, and then over time, we now have like 4 protocols that we support that do decentralized liquidity for Bitcoin. And through that process, our API, we've worked with a lot of wallets. So the irony prior to us offering SwapKit as an API service, a lot of wallets, even though they're self-custodial, they relied on broker services, which are essentially custodial, but they give the users the experience they wanted, which is single transaction swaps, right? But what they did was they took user funds in custody and swapped on a centralized exchange. So what that meant was the quotes they gave, is flexible, right? Let's just say, and also you have potential funds being frozen mid-flight and KYC risks and all of that stuff, which goes against, a self-custodial wallet experience, right? So it took, basically essentially a whole cycle for a product like SwapKit to be able to solve that. And obviously, wallets needed to give those users, those UX, last cycle. So I think these things definitely take a long time to reach fruition, to be able to say, okay, now the DeFi solution is comparable. If not, you can replace centralized solutions for it. But ultimately, it's up to the users to decide the counterparty risk, right? And just to kind of wrap it up a bit, because I think we already covered some of the things that I wanted to really dive down. I think before entering this conversation, I Googled, the term CeDeFi, and actually you had a lot of articles talking about the last cycle as well, right? And I think the impression that might have been left on everyone from last cycle is it's basically projects like Celsius and BlockFi where, they were operating on a centralized format, and the users didn't have access to the private keys. So if anything goes wrong, essentially you were completely locked out of your own assets, right? And this cycle, I think, is very different now. We talked about actually how do you solve these problems, and we were talking about actually the DeFi wallet is being reversed. Something like Hyperliquid is actually very decentralized in terms of the UX on the front end, but in terms of you connecting your wallets and doing all the bridging your assets over. But maybe the liquidity and order books and how it actually operates on the back end is much more opaque, right? So I guess to wrap everything up, looking forward maybe 3 to 5 years, where do you see this sort of like balance, going. And if you are like for new builders who might be trying to decide between how they want to design their product or source the liquidity or whatever, where do you find the balance between centralized solutions versus decentralized? In the next 3 to 5 years.
So I still think that the liquidity will come from CeFi, but it will be in DeFi right now. So initially, like all the people who actually wants to focus on CeFi, they can just go to decentralized places. They don't have to come to crypto for that. But if you are coming to crypto, the major focus for that is like you be on the CeFi side, you come to CeDeFi side, then you come to the DeFi side. So it is a process. Maybe by next cycle, whoever started trading on-chain stocks and everything, like stable coins and stuff, they started holding it, they'll be a part of like the DeFi next cycle, because it happens with everyone. So when you start coming to crypto, you start with centralized exchange. Then you be in the cycle, you know how to use the products, then you see some opportunities and you come to the DeFi side. That will be the same thing happen. So let's hypothetically, say suppose if the market goes down now and bear market starts. So people who are holding the tokens or stocks, they will get to know from their peers that you can buy all these things, take and do all the stuff to earn a yield out of it. People will start buying it, holding it. For now, it will be purely on the DeFi side. And once the market start pumping, they are already into that particular cycle of DeFi. So they won't go again to a centralized exchange. They'll just be here, they'll start using, because it's more about how adopted you are with it. So if you know how to save your seed phrase, you're mostly sorted with the wallets. If you know how the DEX or a bridge works, you're already sorted. You don't have to worry about which gas token you need to use. So that's a simple process which will be like even 100 years later. So there will be new narratives. They will be coming to the new narrative. After that, they will be coming to the core product line.
I would think if you are the builders and you think about how you want to build your stuff between CeFi and DeFi, always think about what your users want. And whether they value speed more or they think a lot about keeping their own assets on chain, and always do a lot of user research before you start building. Because I do think that building something that users love to use and will actually use it very actively is really important. And whether your protocol is going to be more CeFi or DeFi is really a secondary question after whether users will use your product. If you build a piece of product that maybe is like super decentralized, but no one uses it, then in the end, it's not gonna go anywhere. But if you build, let's say, a fantastic product, but maybe you sacrifice some of the DeFi features for the centralized speed or latencies, and people love it, that's gonna help you find your product market fit. So I do think that it's not about what you want to build, it's more about understand what matters to your users in terms of the specific vertical you are building on.
I think the lines are already blurring between like DeFi, CeFi, and I think that's why there's this CeDeFi term. I think back in, almost exactly a year ago, the whole industry was talking about intent-based solving and really trying to make things more efficient on the trading front. Prior to that, actually decentralized volumes are going at, I think, 8 to 10% relative to 90% on CEXs. And then over the last 1 year, it grew another 10%. So right now we are at 20. I think the ratio will still continue to diverge, and that's why, as a firm, Herring is a lot more bullish on DeFi volumes, right? And I think the way to, and another point is, nothing is free, right? If I think, to put it bluntly, liquidity, number one, liquidity is not free. Of course, we all want the best of both worlds, to have custody and to have a lot of security, to take things into our own hands, and yet have the same kind of liquidity you can get on Binance. But I think that's where the role of trading firms really come in, because for tiny spreads, we can get prices for you quite similar to CEXs. Maybe you pay a little bit more because, again, nothing is free. If you want to do it this way, you have to pay a little bit more slippage, right? And then the solvers at the back end will do everything else from you to either extract liquidity from some of these CEX platforms. But I think you take one step back, you look at how this thing really pans out. I think that alone will show us that the ratio will probably end up closer to 50-50 in the future compared to the 2080 that we are seeing right now.
Okay, so I think CeDeFi in the last cycle started with a very promising start, and then it caused several high-profile bankruptcies, as we know, and it kind of caused crypto winter, and that we are just recovering from. So we should be slightly cautious, of course, and learn on our past experiences in terms of how to approach, CeDeFi itself. However, even though we had this experience, I think we should give CeDeFi a second chance. And actually, there is a very big potential for this direction to develop very positively for everyone in crypto. This is going to give opportunity for traditional finance to migrate to crypto, bring new asset classes, real-world assets, more stable coins, many fiat stable coins, I would say, and many assets should come on chain, and users need to have like this opportunity to buy these assets. It will have a big transformational effect throughout the world, and the reason for that is because many users from different countries do not have access to buy many of such kind of assets that are regulated under different countries. Of course, this being said, I am, of course, as soon as we are speaking about centralization aspects, I think we have to have good regulation, appropriate regulation that on one hand is not too restrictive to kill the projects or industry, but on the other hand is very reasonably made that protects users' interests to make sure that the users are protected at the end of the day, and they don't lose their funds at the end of the day. There's a lot of promising developments happening. The Genius Act, the Clarity Act that will be coming soon as well. There's going to be a lot of clarity into the industry. So I would say cautiously very optimistic about how this will develop in the future.
Awesome. Well, it's always great to end on an optimistic note. So I think our time is up. But thank you everyone for sharing your insights today, and wish you everyone's projects all the best.